What are your thoughts on, just across the lake with the GMO labeling saga? I know that's totally wide open and you can go on forever, but what's your quick take on that?
Quick disclosure, disclaimer, I am a co-author of a report from the American Council of Science and Technology, CAST, Agricultural Science and Technology, I should say, on labeling, so you can read the paper. Just a few observations about it. Overarchingly, the whole issue of labeling has been one of the tools or weapons that the anti-GM movement has used to bring attention to GM as being different and to cement in people's minds that they are somehow new, different, scary, and shouldn't be eaten. And the purpose of getting labeling is so that they can then attack them and tell people not to buy labeled foods. So it has nothing to do with either a consumer's right to know or consumer's interest in knowing. I showed you data that it's not really top of mind for most consumers. So this is a contrived movement for a political objective. So you have to understand what's going on. If you think I'm making that up, I can get you quotes from all the leaders of the anti-GM movement saying exactly what I just said. I didn't make that up. So what is going to be the consequence for consumers? When I was on the FDA Food Advisory Committee, we looked at healthy labeling and whether we could get a little, like a heart healthy thing we could put on products that we were recommending for consumers to eat. And we did, or the FDA did for us, some labeling experiments and some observational studies of humans in supermarkets. And it turned out that the two most significant results were, one, humans don't look at labels in supermarkets unless they have allergies, or maybe the first time they buy a product. They assume the product is the same every time they buy it thereafter, but you know what? Manufacturers change what's in a product all the time. Bad assumption, especially if you have allergies. Second thing is consumers know what's good for them and what's not. If you put a heart healthy label on an ice cream package, consumers just snicker at you. They know it's not heart healthy. And so they go into the store with a mindset of what they want to buy, what's good for them, what's bad for them, what they want to spend on, the convenience they're looking for, and all those kinds of things. So I'm not convinced in most cases that the labeling wouldn't be largely ignored, but that's not the issue. It is an immutable truth that because of the way these labeling laws are written, it will cost companies more to formulate both GM and non-GM products. If they want to label them as being totally GM-free, that's going to cost them more. If they want to label them as containing GM, that will cost them more. What's paradoxical, it will actually cost the companies who make GM-free products more than the companies that make GM-containing products. The cheapest way out is just label your products and don't even bother to test them. Just label them. And most companies won't do that. They're afraid they'll lose some percentage of the market. And to a food company, losing 4% of the market is horrendous. That's like you fire everybody and start over. So it puts the companies in a really unthinkable position. They've all had to come up with some kind of strategy for dealing with Vermont. It's going to affect what they get to eat in California because companies make one product and they distribute it nationally. So costs are going to be more. My best guess from listening to resource economists and ag economists and business people is it will cost every family of four about $500 to $1,000 a year to have GM labeling in this country. And it will buy nobody any safety. It will buy them nothing. It will probably restrict their choice because many products that once contained GM won't be on the shelf. Grape nuts went GM-free a couple of years ago as a test by Post, and Cheerios went GM-free. And they basically decreased the amount of cereal in the box and took the free vitamins out of the box. And in one case, increased the cost of the cereal. So, I mean, to clearly demonstrate what happens when you go to products. On a more philosophical note, our system is operated as a voluntary system. I have no problem with consumers having choice. That's how our system runs. So there should be an organic food section if that's what people want. And there should be GM-free products on the shelf if there's a market for them, if people will buy them. And so you don't have a mandatory law, use the same voluntary system we've always used. If you want a kosher product, you look for a can that has voluntarily made itself a kosher product. If you want a halal product, you look for a can that has a little symbol that says it's voluntarily complied with halal and gotten certified. If you want a vegan product, you look for the same thing. And so those voluntary systems where the consumer who cares about the trait pays for the trait gives the rest of us the right not to buy that trait and not pay for the cost of imposing that trait on the food supply. The Supreme Court has interpreted requiring a label without a material reason like safety to be a violation of corporate free speech. It's called forced speech. And there are ample precedents in the law that would make the Vermont law unconstitutional. The second piece of that is it violates the interstate commerce authority of the government. Food is in interstate commerce, and that falls under the federal government's power to regulate. So those laws should be thrown out by the court. But the jurist in the Vermont case has got the industry pretty scared. It doesn't really look like she buys what I just said about constitutional law. It may well go to the Supreme Court, but the industry may decide that it's cheaper, and by the way, if they do it right, more profitable, to just make everybody eat organic and GM-free food and not worry about it. The food industry is the bigger chicken than the biotech industry. Their view is a penny a can, millions of cans, and don't lose 1%. I mean, it is the smallest mind with no vision of the future that I've ever encountered. And I was an officer in the Institute of Food Technology, that is the industry organization, and I say that quite knowingly. They have to be. They can't make money if they're not that way. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Corporations are there to make money. And so they'll do the expedient thing. Or they'll be out of business, or you'll be out of a job, right? Yeah. So that's my take on labeling. It's something we shouldn't do for sure.